Welcome to Sinister States.
The first thing I noticed on my first overnight run wasn't the passengers. It was the silence that settled into the train once the last station lights slipped behind us. Silence doesn't mean quiet, not on a machine like this. There's always motion, always sound, steel humming against steel, a low vibration through the floor that creeps up into your bones if you let it. But there's a difference between noise and presence, and that night, as the countryside dissolved into darkness beyond the windows, the presence felt thin, stretched, as if the train itself were holding its breath. I had taken the conductor job because it paid better than anything else I could get without moving. Overnight shifts paid even more. Fewer passengers, they said. Easier work, they said. Mostly sleeping commuters and the occasional insomniac heading somewhere they didn't want to be. I told myself I liked the solitude. Truth was, I needed the money, and I needed something that kept me moving forward, even if it was only on rails that looped through the same towns every night. The train was old, older than most of the people riding it, with faded upholstery and windows that never quite came clean no matter how much you scrubbed. When you walked the aisle, your footsteps echoed softly, swallowed by fabric and years of absorbed sound. The lights overhead buzzed faintly, casting everything in a yellowed glow that made time feel thicker, slower. Faces looked tired under that light, carved with shadows that didn't exist in daylight. My routine was simple. Check tickets, note occupied seats, keep an eye out for trouble. The first few hours passed without incident. A couple slept with their heads pressed to the glass, breath fogging the windows in slow, steady rhythms. One man stared straight ahead, eyes open but unfocused, like he was watching something far beyond the dark fields rushing past. I didn't bother him. You learn quickly who wants to be left alone. Around 1 a.m, after our longest stretch between stops, I felt it again. That thinning, like the air had been pulled tighter. I paused near the junction between cars, one hand resting against the cold metal of the door. The train swayed gently, and for a moment I thought I heard footsteps behind me. When I turned, there was nothing there, just empty seats and the low hum of motion. I told myself it was nothing. Trains make sounds, buildings settle, your mind fills in gaps when you're tired. I continued my walk, counting seats out of habit. 32 occupied. That number stuck with me, though I couldn't say why. I'd counted it twice already, and both times it came out the same, 32. At the next stop, only one person got off, a woman in a long coat, her face hidden by her hood. She didn't look at me as she passed, and I remember thinking she moved strangely, like her steps didn't quite line up with the rhythm of the platform. When the doors closed and we pulled away, I did another count, 32. I stopped walking. I knew I hadn't picked anyone up. That stop was scheduled, but no one ever boarded there overnight. I checked my log. No new tickets scanned. My chest tightened in a way that felt ridiculous, like my body was reacting before my brain could catch up. I counted again, slower this time, touching the back of each seat as I passed. 32. One of the seats near the rear car was occupied now, a place that had been empty earlier. A man sat there, hands folded in his lap, staring at the floor. He wore a dark suit that looked too formal for a train like this, especially at this hour.
His hair was neatly combed, not a strand out of place. I couldn't remember seeing him bored, but that didn't mean much. People slip past you all the time. "Ticket, sir," I said, keeping my voice steady. He didn't respond. I repeated myself, a little louder. Still nothing. The train rocked gently, and for a moment I thought he might be asleep, but his eyes were open. I could see them now, unfocused, reflecting the overhead lights without really looking at them. "I'm already here," he said, softly. The words didn't make sense, but they landed heavy in my stomach. I swallowed and forced a professional smile. "I still need to check your ticket." He tilted his head, considering me. "You've already counted me," he said. "You just didn't know it." I stepped back before I realized I was moving. The train's hum seemed louder now, pressing in on my ears. "Sir, if you don't have a ticket, I'll have to ask you to move to the nearest station." He smiled then, a small, sad curve of his mouth. "This is the nearest station," he said, and turned his gaze back to the floor. I stood there for a long moment, my mind scrambling for something logical, something solid to hold on to. People say strange things all the time. Stress, fatigue, mental illness. I wrote it off as best I could and continued my walk, though my steps were quicker now. When I finished the car and circled back, his seat was empty. I checked the doors, still sealed. The windows showed nothing but darkness and the occasional flash of distant lights. I counted again, 32. By the time we reached the next stop, my nerves were shot. I watched the doors closely as they opened. 2 people boarded this time, a young couple with matching backpacks. They laughed quietly as they found seats together. When the doors closed, I counted 34. Relief washed over me, sharp and almost dizzying. "See," I told myself, "numbers add up." That's all it was, a miscount, a stranger I missed. My body slowly relaxed, though the sense of being watched lingered like a fading echo. I made my way back toward the front, nodding to the engineer through the small window of the cabin. He looked tired, eyes rimmed red, but he returned the nod. Everything normal, everything fine. Then I heard it, a voice, low and close, right behind me. "You shouldn't count us like that." I turned so fast my shoulder clipped the wall. The aisle was empty. My heart hammered in my chest, each beat loud enough that I was sure someone else must hear it. I stood there, breathing hard, feeling foolish. Stress, I told myself again. Lack of sleep. I forced myself to finish the run. No more incidents, no strange passengers. When we pulled into the final station just before dawn, I felt like I'd been holding my breath for hours. People disembarked in a slow trickle, stretching and yawning, ready to start their days. I did one last count as they left, purely out of habit. 0. The train was empty. I locked up and headed home, exhausted but relieved. I slept through the day, dreamless and heavy. When I woke that evening, my phone buzzed with a notification from work. A routine message reminding conductors to log passenger counts accurately. Attached was my log from the previous night, 32. I didn't think about the number again until the following night, when I stepped onto the platform with my uniform still smelling faintly of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. The sky hung low and overcast, the kind of gray that never quite turns into rain but promises it anyway. The train waited with its lights on, doors open, patient as ever. I told myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Fatigue plus solitude equals nonsense. I'd heard worse explanations for stranger feelings. Still, before I even boarded, I felt it. That same thinness in the air, like the world had been stretched just a little too tight. The first passengers arrived in small groups. A middle-aged man with a briefcase, a teenager wearing oversized headphones, a woman clutching a paper bag that smelled faintly of fried food. I scanned tickets, nodded, smiled when appropriate. I counted without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. I stopped myself at 10 and laughed quietly under my breath. Get a grip, I told myself. By the time we pulled out of the station, we had the usual overnight crowd, sparse, subdued, wrapped in their own little bubbles of exhaustion. The hum of the train settled into its familiar rhythm, and for a while, things felt normal, comfortably boring. I let myself relax. It didn't last. I was midway through my first walk when I noticed the reflection in one of the windows didn't match what I was seeing inside the car. Outside, the darkness rushed past, broken only by the occasional distant light. Inside, the rows of seats stretched behind me, mostly occupied, their forms distorted by glass and motion. But in the reflection, there were more shapes than there should have been. Figures standing where there were no aisles, faces hovering just behind the glass, pale and indistinct. I stopped and turned slowly. Nothing. The seats were exactly as they had been. No extra passengers, no standing figures, just the low buzz of lights and the gentle sway beneath my feet. I stared at the window again. My own reflection stared back. Tired eyes, drawn face. No one else. I moved on, telling myself reflections were tricky at night. Your brain fills in blanks, pattern-seeking nonsense. Still, I avoided looking at the windows after that. At the first overnight stop, no one boarded. One man got off, rubbing his eyes as if he hadn't slept at all. When the doors closed, I counted. 31. That made sense. One off, none on. I felt a small, irrational surge of satisfaction. Numbers behaved when you paid attention to them. Then, somewhere between stations, the intercom crackled. "This is your conductor speaking," the engineer's voice said, slightly distorted. "We'll be making our next stop in approximately 20 minutes. Normal, routine, except I hadn't heard him press the button. The crackle had come out of nowhere, loud enough for a few passengers to shift in their seats. I glanced toward the front of the car, considering a quick check-in, but decided against it. No need to bother him over nothing. A few minutes later, the intercom crackled again. "This is your conductor speaking." It wasn't the engineer's voice. It was mine.
The words were identical. Same cadence, same slight drag on the last syllable of speaking. My stomach dropped. I stood frozen, listening as the announcement continued, describing a stop that wasn't on our route, naming a station I'd never heard of. The sound faded out in a wash of static, leaving behind an oppressive quiet. Passengers murmured, some looking around in confusion. One woman raised her hand halfway, like she wasn't sure if she should ask a question. I forced myself to move, walking quickly toward the front. The engineer was slumped in his seat, eyes closed, breathing slow and even. Asleep. I shook his shoulder gently, then harder. He startled awake, blinking. "What?" he said, voice thick. "Did you make an announcement just now?" I asked. He frowned. "No, I just nodded off for a second." I didn't tell him what I'd heard. I nodded, told him everything was fine, and stepped back into the car. My heart wouldn't slow down. I scanned the faces of the passengers, half expecting to see someone grinning, someone enjoying a private joke. Everyone looked tired, confused, normal. I counted. 32. The seat near the rear was occupied again, same place as the night before. A woman this time, her hair pulled back tight, hands folded neatly on her knees. She stared straight ahead, lips moving silently, like she was reciting something under her breath. I approached slowly. "Ticket, please?" I said. She didn't look at me. Her lips kept moving. "Ma'am?" I tried again. She stopped, finally turning her head. Her eyes were milky, unfocused. "You're late," she said. "For what?" I asked before I could stop myself. "For noticing," she replied. "They don't like that." "Who?" My voice sounded small in my own ears. She smiled faintly. "The ones who ride all the way." A chill ran through me. "Ma'am, if you don't have a ticket..." She reached into her coat and handed me a slip of paper. It wasn't a ticket. It was a receipt, yellowed and brittle, dated decades ago. The name printed at the top was the name of a town that no longer existed, one that had been absorbed by a larger city years before I was born. "I got on when this was still a stop," she said softly. "That's not possible," I said, though I wasn't sure why I bothered. My hands trembled as I held the paper. Nothing stays possible forever. I blinked, and she was gone. The receipt fluttered to the floor. I bent to pick it up, and when I straightened, the paper had turned to dust in my fingers. I stared at my empty palm, my mind reeling. Around me, the train continued on, oblivious. I finished the run in a haze. Every sound made me flinch. Every shadow seemed too deep. When the final station approached, I felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation. As the train slowed, the lights flickered, once, twice, then steadied. The doors opened. No one moved. Passengers sat still, staring forward. I cleared my throat. "This is the final stop," I announced, my voice echoing unnaturally in the car. "All passengers must disembark." Nothing. I walked the aisle,
gently touching shoulders, repeating myself. They didn't respond. Their skin was cold under my fingers, colder than it should have been. Panic rose in my chest, sharp and suffocating. I counted. 32. The doors began to close. "No," I said, louder this time, breaking into a run. I hit the emergency stop, the mechanism protesting with a shrill alarm. The doors froze, half open. Cold air rushed in from the platform. The passengers vanished. One moment they were there, filling the seats. The next, the car was empty. No movement, no sound. Just me, alone with the hum of the train and the echo of my own breathing. I stood there for a long time, unable to move. When I finally left the train, my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. I filed my report with shaking hands, leaving out everything that mattered. Missing time, phantom announcements, disappearing passengers. I wrote what I always wrote. Uneventful run. No incidents. At home, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the intercom crackle. I heard my own voice telling me about stops that didn't exist. By morning, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't alone on that train at night. By the third night, the routine felt like a lie I was telling myself out of stubbornness. I showed up anyway, uniform pressed, badge pinned straight, pretending that repetition could smooth over what I'd seen. The platform was quieter than usual, the air colder, carrying the faint metallic scent that always clung to the rails after sunset. I paused before boarding, watching my reflection ripple in the darkened window of the lead car. For a moment, it looked like someone stood just behind me, close enough that I should have felt their breath on my neck. When I turned, there was no one there. I didn't tell anyone about the second night, not the phantom announcement, not the woman with the impossible receipt. Some things feel weaker once you say them out loud, and I couldn't afford to weaken whatever grip I still had on reality. Instead, I focused on procedure. I memorized my checklist, recited it under my breath as I worked. Check tickets, note seats, watch doors, count only when necessary. The train pulled out with fewer passengers than usual. A handful of late shift workers, a man in a rumpled coat nursing a thermos, two students whispering to each other like the world might overhear them. I checked tickets quickly and retreated to the junction between cars, leaning against the cool metal. The hum of the train vibrated through me, steady and reassuring. Motion meant progress. Progress meant control. Somewhere past the midpoint of the route, the lights dimmed. Not off, just dimmer, as if someone had turned down a dial no one was supposed to touch. Shadows deepened, pooling in corners and under seats. The buzz overhead dropped to a lower pitch that set my teeth on edge. A few passengers looked up, uneasy. I forced a smile and told them it happens sometimes. Voltage fluctuations, nothing to worry about. I almost believed it myself. I resumed my walk, slower now, more deliberate. I avoided counting until I reached the rear car. When I did, my breath caught. 33. I froze, my hand gripping the back of a seat hard enough that my knuckles ached. I retraced my steps, recounting, touching each headrest, each armrest, grounding myself in physical contact. 33. The extra seat was occupied by a boy no older than 12, feet dangling above the floor. He wore a school uniform, the fabric outdated, the colors faded. His hands were folded in his lap, mimicking the posture I'd seen before.
"Where did you get on?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. He looked up at me, eyes too old for his face. "I didn't," he said. "That's not funny.
I replied, though nothing about him suggested he was joking. "This isn't a place for games." He shrugged. "It's a place for waiting." Waiting. The words settled into me, heavy and cold. "Where are your parents?" I asked. "Still riding," he said. "They missed their stop." I swallowed. What stop was that? He tilted his head, considering. "The one before they forgot." The lights flickered again, briefly plunging the car into near darkness. When they steadied, the boy was gone. The seat was empty, the upholstery undisturbed. My heart pounded so hard I felt lightheaded. I backed away, scanning the car. No sign of him, no sign of anyone else new. I counted. 32. I leaned against the wall, breathing slowly, trying to steady myself. Hallucinations, I thought. Stress-induced sleep deprivation. Your mind fills gaps with stories when it's pushed too far. I almost laughed at the irony. A storyteller trapped in his own fiction. The intercom crackled. "This is your conductor speaking," my voice said again. I clenched my jaw, refusing to react. The announcement continued, calm and measured, listing safety procedures I'd memorized months ago. Then it deviated just slightly. "Please remain seated if you are not yet finished," it said. Finished with what? The question echoed in my head. I looked around. Several passengers stared straight ahead, eyes glassy, expressions blank. The students had stopped whispering. The man with the thermos gripped it tightly, knuckles white. I moved toward the front, my steps quickening. The engineer was awake this time, eyes wide, hands clenched on the controls. "Did you hear that?" he asked as soon as he saw me. "Yes," I said. "Did you make that announcement?" He shook his head. I tried to override it. The system wouldn't respond. A chill crept down my spine. Has this happened before? He hesitated. Not like this. The train lurched slightly, slowing without any input from the controls. The engineer swore under his breath, fingers flying over switches that did nothing. Outside, the darkness seemed thicker, pressing against the windows. I glanced at the speedometer. We were decelerating, approaching a stop that wasn't scheduled. "Where are we?" I asked. The engineer stared ahead. "There's no station here." The brakes engaged with a shudder that rattled the car. The train came to a halt in the middle of nowhere. No lights, no platform, just endless dark stretching in every direction. The doors remained closed. Silence settled in, broken only by the ticking of cooling metal. I stepped back into the passenger car, dread coiling tight in my chest. The lights were dimmer still, casting long shadows that seemed to twist when I wasn't looking at them directly. I walked the aisle, calling out, but no one answered. One by one, I realized the seats were empty. All of them. I counted anyway, my voice a whisper. 0. The intercom clicked on one last time. "Thank you for riding," my voice said, warm and practiced. "This is where we part ways." "No," I said aloud. "You don't get to decide that."
I don't know why I said it. Defiance felt foolish, but it was all I had left. The air grew colder, my breath fogging in front of me. The windows frosted over from the edges inward, obscuring the darkness outside. I felt something shift behind me, a presence too close, too large. "You noticed," a voice said, not mine this time, layered with others, overlapping in a way that made my head ache. "That means you count." I spun around. Figures filled the car, standing shoulder to shoulder in the aisle, their forms indistinct, faces blurred as if smeared by motion. I recognized some of them. The man in the suit, the woman with the receipt, the boy in the uniform. Dozens more, stretching back farther than the car should allow. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice shaking. "To ride," they said together. To be carried, to be accounted for. I'm not taking you anywhere, I said. This isn't a stop. One of them stepped forward, resolving into a familiar shape. The woman from the second night. It is for us, she said, gently. It always is. I felt a pressure build in my ears, a low hum rising, matching the vibration of the train. My vision blurred at the edges. I staggered, grabbing a seat for support. Count us, they urged. Make us real. No, I whispered. I won't. The hum intensified, becoming a roar. Lights burst, plunging the car into darkness. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for something I couldn't name. When the sensation stopped, I was on the platform. Morning light filtered through clouds, pale and weak. The train sat silent behind me, doors open, empty. Commuters bustled past, oblivious, coffee in hand, faces turned toward the day ahead. My uniform was rumpled, my hands shaking. A supervisor approached, concern etched on his face. You okay? He asked. Engineer said you froze up out there. I nodded numbly. Yeah, just tired. He studied me for a moment, then sighed. Take a few days, get some rest. I went home and slept for nearly 18 hours. When I woke, the hum was gone. The echoes had faded. I told myself it was over. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear my voice in my dreams making announcements for stops that don't exist. I tried to convince myself the dreams were just residue, harmless impressions left behind by exhaustion and fear. Life returned to something like normal. I took daytime shifts for a while, shorter routes, familiar faces. I stopped counting unless policy required it, and even then I did it quickly, without ceremony, as if speed could strip the numbers of meaning. For a few weeks, it worked. Then the letters started arriving. No return address, no postage marks I recognized, just my name, written carefully, always in the same neat hand. Inside each envelope was a slip of paper with a single number written on it. 31, 32, 33. They came in order, one per day. I tried throwing them away, but the next morning they'd be back on my kitchen table, the paper smelling faintly of cold metal and ozone. On the 34th day, I broke. I went to the depot after hours, using my old badge to slip past security. The overnight train sat idle on a sidetrack, dark and silent. I stood there for a long time, staring at it, listening to the distant hum that might have been my imagination. I know you're in there, I said softly. The lights flickered on, one by one. The doors slid open with a familiar hiss. Inside, the car was empty, clean, expectant. I stepped aboard despite every instinct screaming at me to run. The doors closed behind me. The hum returned, gentle this time, almost welcoming. The intercom crackled. Count, my voice whispered. I walked the aisle, heart pounding, forcing myself to look at every seat. They were empty, all of them. Relief washed over me, so sharp it hurt. I laughed, the sound brittle. See, I said, nothing left. The train shuddered, shadows gathered, pooling and thickening, resolving into shapes that filled the seats one by one. Faces turned toward me, patient, familiar. Too late, they said. I understood then. It was never about finishing. It was about continuing, about making space. I don't remember leaving the train. I woke up at home, another envelope on my chest.
Inside was a single slip of paper. 35. I still work the rails. Different city now, different line. But sometimes when the lights dim just a little too much and the hum drops into that old familiar pitch, I catch myself counting without meaning to. And somewhere behind me, I always feel someone take a seat.